Hello, and welcome back to Polyglot Nook. I am so glad you're here with me today. And I hope you're having a fantastic week. This is our day for a deep dive, a day for a practicum where we usually look at questions about the techniques and methods we talk about on the show. But this week, something interesting happened. We didn't get any questions at all. Zero. And in a way, that's a good thing. It gives me a chance to share something that has completely changed my own approach to learning. For the last week, I've been completely absorbed in an amazing book. The book is called Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. This book is deeply connected to how we learn languages. And it has some truly fascinating ideas that I just can't wait to share with you. I listened to the book, as I often do, because audiobooks are one of my main sources for listening practice. And as I listen, I try to immediately apply the advice I hear, retelling the main ideas of a book. For example, is one of the most powerful tools for learning, according to the authors themselves. So, today, I'm going to share those ideas with you. And I'm going to use some of my own experiences and some fictional characters to make it feel more personal. Let's talk for a moment about the authors. The two main authors of this book are two brilliant minds. The first is a man I'll call Dr. Henry Rote. He's a professor of psychology at a university in St. Louis, and a very well-known expert in cognitive psychology and the science of memory. His research is focused on how our memory works and the role of practice and testing in the learning process. The second author, I'll call him Dr. Mark McDaniel, is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the same university. He's an expert in memory, and he spends a lot of time on the practical side of learning methods, especially spaced repetition and retrieval practice. Together, they've created a book that combines decades of scientific theory with practical, real-world advice. This isn't just for teachers or students. It's for anyone, including you and me, who wants to learn more effectively. The first big idea: why we learn poorly. The main conclusion. The very first big idea this book brings up is a little bit hard to swallow. The authors state very clearly that most people learn badly. Now, what does that mean? It means that we go through the motions. We read the book. We listen to the lesson. But the information doesn't stick. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The water is there for a moment, but then it's gone. The biggest reason for this, they say, is that we have a fundamentally wrong idea of what learning is. We tend to see learning as a passive process. We think that if we just sit there and receive information, and then we repeat it over and over, we will learn it. It seems logical, right? You listen to a story. You repeat the words, and now you know them. But this is an illusion. It's a very convincing, very comfortable illusion. But it's a false one. We've all been guilty of this. We apply this method of learning through repetition to almost every area of our lives. And many of us, especially when learning a language, run into the same brick wall. We can't remember the words. We can't remember the grammar rules. We spend hundreds, maybe thousands, of hours on this process, and we don't make the progress we want. The authors of Make It Stick call this method rereading. What is rereading? It's when you read something, you don't remember it, so you read it again. It's rereading, or re-listening, or looking over the same flashcards again and again. This process, they say, gives us a false sense of progress. It feels like we're learning, because we're seeing the information, and it feels familiar. But this familiarity only strengthens our short-term memory. It doesn't move the information into our long-term memory, which is where true, lasting knowledge lives. Imagine you're trying to build a beautiful house. You spend every afternoon just looking at the bricks, touching them, and putting them in a pile. It feels like you're doing something, like you're learning something about bricks. But you never actually put them together with mortar to build a wall. You never actually lift the heavy bricks and build a house. So when someone asks you to build a wall, you can't. You know what the bricks look like, but you haven't built the muscle memory, the skill, or the knowledge of how they fit together. That's what rereading is like for your brain. It makes the information familiar, but it doesn't build the connections that allow you to use that information when you need it most. Now, this illusion is very powerful. Why? Because it's easy. It feels comfortable. When you reread a text, the sentences flow easily. And you think, oh, I know this. I understand this. But understanding something in the moment is not the same as remembering it later. And this is the fundamental mistake we make. We confuse the ease of rereading with the effort of real learning. The ease of rereading only gives us a temporary feeling of progress, a feeling that vanishes the moment we close the book. So, if rereading isn't the answer, what is? The authors of Make It Stick say we should focus on something called retrieval practice. Retrieval is the active process of pulling information out of your memory. It's a bit like a mental treasure hunt, or pulling a book off a high shelf. It's not passive, it's active. This process is much more effective because the very act of retrieving information, of trying to recall it, strengthens that memory. The more we pull something out of our brain, the easier it is to find it the next time we need it. The main principle they promote is that learning should be difficult. No effort. No learning. It's that simple. The easy path. The path of simply rereading leads to no lasting knowledge. Learning through effort, on the other hand, creates a strong foundation that stays with us forever. Let me tell you about a friend of mine, a language learner I'll call Mike. Mike was trying to learn Spanish. He bought a vocabulary book and spent hours and hours every night reading through the lists of words. The words became familiar to him. He would read the word casa and immediately think house. He would read perro and immediately think dog. He felt like he was making amazing progress. But then, one day, he was in a conversation with a native speaker, and he needed to say the word house. He stood there, completely frozen. He knew the word, but he couldn't pull it out of his brain. He didn't have the key to open that part of his memory. This is the difference between a language environment and true immersion. What Mike was doing was creating a passive environment for himself. He was just looking at the bricks. But he wasn't building anything. What he needed was a moment of struggle. That moment of effort to remember the word casa is where the real learning happens. Or, it's correcting your own mistakes as you speak. Or trying to practice a new grammar structure in a spontaneous, unprepared situation. All of this effort, this struggle, is what builds the lasting foundation in our brains. The authors say that the most powerful tool for this kind of learning is self-testing. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tests feel bad. They feel stressful. But they are not talking about formal, stressful exams. They are talking about self-quizzing or self-checking. The fundamental difference between a test and simple repetition is that a test forces us to actively retrieve information. It's like having a puzzle in front of you. You can look at the solution all day, but you won't learn how to solve the puzzle yourself until you actually try to put the pieces together. Tests help us in two main ways. First, they help us find our gaps. We might think we know a word just because we've seen it on a flashcard a dozen times. But when we try to use it in a conversation, it's gone. Self-testing reveals these gaps, showing us exactly what we need to focus on. When Mike couldn't remember the word casa, his brain was giving him a signal. It was saying, "Hey, you think you know this word, but you can't use it." This is a gap. Second, the very act of recalling information during a test solidifies that memory. It makes the knowledge stronger. Think of your brain like a forest. Passive learning is like a plane flying over the top of the trees. You can see the whole forest, but you don't know the paths inside. Active retrieval, or self-testing, is like walking through the forest on a path. The more you walk on that path, the clearer it becomes. Soon, it's not a path anymore. It's a road. That's what happens in your brain every time you successfully retrieve a word or a grammar rule. You make the path stronger and easier to follow next time. This is why testing is not just for measuring your knowledge. It's for building it. The key message in the preface of this book, where the authors summarize their entire argument, is that quizzing, or putting yourself in a situation where you need to use a skill, is much more effective than just simple repetition. If you don't practice your knowledge in a real situation, that knowledge is just a dream. It's a wish that never becomes a reality. The key to finding your true skills and your true gaps is to test yourself, to simulate the real situation and to put yourself in it. Now, let's look at the 4 strategies they suggest for successful learning. The 4 strategies are a combination of different things, all based on the idea of retrieval and effort. The first strategy is regular self-quizzing. The second is something called spaced practice. The third is interleaving or varied practice. And the fourth is trying to solve a problem before getting the solution. We've already talked about self-quizzing, but I want to go a little deeper into it. What does it mean to constantly, regularly, check your skills? It means you should always be trying to validate your knowledge. Do I know this or not? It's not about being hard on yourself. It's about being honest with yourself. When you are honest about what you know and what you don't know, you can focus your energy on the right things. This strategy gives you a clear roadmap. It tells you exactly where you need to go next. And this leads us to the next strategy, which is about how we organize our practice. The second key strategy is what the authors call spaced practice. This is a form of spaced repetition, and it's a very simple but incredibly powerful idea. Spaced practice means you should spread out your learning over time, rather than trying to cram it all into one session. Let's think about it like this. Imagine your memory is a garden. You plant a new seed, a new word, or a new grammar rule. If you give that plant water only once, a big flood of water, it will grow a little, but it will quickly die. That big flood is like spending 10 hours on Saturday just looking at a list of new vocabulary. It feels good, but the knowledge doesn't last. Now, imagine watering that same plant a little bit every day. Just a small amount of water today, a little more tomorrow, and a little more the day after that. The plant grows deeper roots and becomes stronger every single time. This is what spaced practice is like. It's the act of coming back to the same information with a little bit of time in between. The authors say that this strategy works because it's the exact opposite of what most of us do. We try to remember things by repeating them over and over right away. But spaced practice forces your brain to retrieve the information from memory at a specific interval, right as you are about to forget it. It's like catching a falling object before it hits the ground. This process, this catching, is what makes the memory permanent. For a language learner, this could look like using audio flashcards where you have to recall a word from memory. You listen to the word in your native language. Then you have a pause to retrieve the English word. And then you hear the correct answer. Then you listen to that same card again later. Maybe after a few days. And then again after a week. And so on. This strategy guarantees that the word will be placed into your long-term memory. Now, the third principle is what they call interleaving or varied practice. This is about mixing up your learning activities. Instead of focusing on just one skill, like just reading or just listening, you need to switch between them. The best example of natural interleaving is a real conversation. When you are in a conversation, you are using many language skills at the same time. First, you are listening, which is a form of auditory comprehension. Second, you are speaking, trying to formulate your own thoughts out loud. Third, you are actively retrieving words and grammar from your memory to form sentences. This is why a simple conversation is such a powerful learning tool. It is a natural combination of all these skills. It forces your brain to be flexible. And it trains you to use the language in unpredictable situations. But we can also apply interleaving to other skills. For example, you might be working on your writing. The authors suggest that instead of just copying sentences, you could write a short essay or a story in your native language. And then try to translate it into your new language. Then you check your work for mistakes. The process of trying to find the right words and grammar rules to express your thoughts is the kind of effortful, retrieval-based learning that makes the knowledge stick. The fourth and final strategy is to try to solve a problem before you get the solution. This is a big departure from traditional teaching methods, where the teacher gives you the correct answer and you simply repeat it. The authors argue that a much better strategy is to first try to find the solution yourself, and then get the correct answer. Let's imagine two students, Sarah and Leo. Sarah is a very traditional learner. When her teacher tells her to learn a new phrase, she simply repeats it. She listens to the teacher, writes it down, and then repeats it a few times. This feels safe and comfortable. But then a week later, when she needs to use that phrase, she can't remember it. Leo, on the other hand, has a different approach. When he hears a new phrase, his teacher doesn't tell him the answer right away. Instead, the teacher gives him a situation where he needs to use the phrase, and Leo has to try to figure it out for himself. He struggles a bit. He tries different words. He makes mistakes. But that effort, that process of trying to solve the problem, is what makes the knowledge stick. When the teacher finally gives him the correct phrase, his brain makes a stronger connection to it because he's already done the work of trying to find it. This approach connects the new information to what he already knows. And that makes the memory much more durable. So, to sum up these four principles, the authors of this incredible book say that learning and retrieval are the same thing. You don't just learn something. You learn to retrieve it. And if you can't retrieve what you've learned in a real situation, then you haven't truly learned it at all. So, now that we understand the theory, how do we put this all into a practical, easy to follow routine? I want to share a simple, 3-stage process that you can start using today. It is based directly on the principles from the book, and it will completely transform how you learn. This routine is your answer to the big question: what should I actually be doing with my time to get better? It turns the abstract ideas of retrieval and effort into a real, actionable plan. The 3 stages are the preparation phase, the conversation phase, and the analysis phase. Let's start with stage 1, the preparation phase. This stage is all about setting yourself up for success. It's a short phase, maybe 15 to 20 minutes a week. But it's incredibly important because it's where the most powerful, effortful learning begins. It's a bit like a chef preparing ingredients before cooking a meal. You wouldn't just start chopping things randomly. You would read the recipe, Find all the ingredients and get them ready. This is what we're going to do. First, you need to choose your topics for the week. Don't just show up to your conversation with nothing to talk about. I always recommend picking between 2 and 3 topics for the week. Let's say you're a student. You might pick topics like my studies, my weekend plans, and my favorite movies. If you work in an office, your topics might be my work project, my hobbies, and the news. By choosing specific topics, you're giving your brain a focus. You're telling it, these are the things we are going to work on. Next, under each topic, you need to write a brief plan of what you want to say. This is not about writing full sentences. It's about outlining your thoughts. For example, under the topic My Studies, you might write, what am I studying? What is my favorite class? What is my hardest class? This is the very first step of retrieval practice. You're trying to recall your own ideas and put them into a simple structure. The third step is to write a list of questions related to those topics. For my studies, you might write questions like, what are you studying? Do you like your classes? What is your hardest subject? These questions will guide your conversation and help you make sure you and your partner are talking about the things you prepared for. This is a form of self-quizzing. You're asking yourself what you need to be able to say, and you're preparing for it. Finally, if you have the time, you can do a quick mental or written draft of what you would say in your native language to answer those questions. Your goal here is not to be perfect. It's to identify your personal weaknesses. What words do you not know? What phrases seem difficult to translate? This is the core of effortful learning. You are struggling with a problem before you get the answer. You can use a dictionary or an AI tool to help you find the correct words and grammar. And you can note them down. The beauty of this step is that your brain is actively working. It's trying to find the missing pieces. And when it finds them, the connection will be so much stronger. Let me tell you about a learner I know, a young woman I'll call Elena. Before she started this routine, she would show up to her language lessons without a plan. The conversations would always be okay, but she would often repeat the same basic phrases, talking about the same things. How was your day? What did you do on the weekend? She was in a passive learning cycle, and her progress was very slow. Then she started this preparation routine. She started with the topic of food. She made a plan. My favorite food. A recipe I want to try. A bad experience I had at a restaurant. She wrote down a few questions for her partner. And she spent about 15 minutes thinking about how she would say these things. She realized she didn't know the word for rosemary. She didn't know how to say spicy. She made a note of it. Then, in her conversation, she used those notes. And she was able to talk about food with so much more confidence and detail. When she used the word rosemary, she knew she had worked for it. It was no longer just a word on a list. It was a word she had retrieved and used. This preparation stage is your secret weapon. It takes a conversation from being a general chat to a focused, powerful learning session. It allows you to enter a conversation with a clear goal. And it gives you the tools to succeed. Now you're ready for stage 2, the conversation phase. You've done your preparation, so you already have a plan. You should have a conversation with a native speaker, a tutor, or a language partner, using the topics you prepared. The most important thing here is to focus on the natural flow of the conversation. You just want to express yourself freely. Don't worry about every single mistake. But you need to do something very, very important. You need to ask your partner to help you. At the beginning of the conversation, you need to ask them to take notes. Tell them to write down any grammar mistakes you make, any pronunciation errors, and any new words or phrases that you didn't know but that were useful for your thoughts. This turns your conversation into a very active, collaborative learning experience. I always ask my partners to do this. And if I see them writing, I often ask, "What did you just write? Is there another way to say that?" This gives you immediate feedback and a solid list of things to work on. After the conversation, you move into stage 3, the analysis phase. This is the most crucial and often most overlooked stage. When the conversation is over, you're left with a list of notes, a list of all your mistakes, and all the new words you've learned. You need to analyze this list. First, go through your grammar mistakes. Ask yourself, why did I make this mistake? For example, your partner wrote down that you said, "I go to the market yesterday" instead of "I went to the market yesterday." This is a signal from your brain telling you there is a gap in your knowledge of past tense. You can even load it into an AI tool and ask it to explain the rule. This process of reflection and understanding is a form of retrieval practice itself. It reinforces the correct way to say things. Next, take all the new vocabulary you learned and turn it into audio flashcards. You can use a flashcard app or simply record yourself. You record the native word in your own language. You leave a pause. And then you record the word in your new language. This forces you to actively retrieve the word from memory. The authors say you should review these cards at least 3 times to make sure they stick. To tie all of this together, you then need to ensure you are doing this cycle of preparation, conversation, and analysis with new topics and with different partners. This is the principle of interleaving in action. By using your skills in varied contexts, you are making your knowledge flexible and adaptable. After you've worked on travel and food, you move on to a new topic, and the cycle begins again. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Learning isn't about how much time you spend, but how you spend it. It's about being intentional. It's about putting in the effort. It's about a 3-stage routine that includes preparation, practice, and analysis. This routine, this constant cycle of putting yourself in a situation where you have to retrieve information, is what interrupts forgetting. It's what moves the knowledge from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, where it becomes a part of you. This is a lesson for all of us. We can't just hope to learn a language by being surrounded by it. We have to take control of the process. We have to be intentional. We have to create our own immersion. So, my call to action for you today is this. Stop hoping for a miracle. Stop trying to find the one shortcut that will make everything easy. Instead, ask yourself, can I commit to a focused routine of preparation, conversation, and analysis? And if you can apply these principles, the results will be nothing short of incredible. Thank you so much for joining me today on Polyglot Nook. I hope the ideas from Make It Stick have given you a fresh perspective on your own language journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I wish you all the best on your language journey, and I'll see you next time.